Millions of years ago, the first land plants appeared on Earth. They were nothing like these plants around us, which have evolved to survive the harsh climate of the desert. However, our species Homo sapien evolved just 300,000 years ago. Biology has taught us that given enough time, evolution can shape such diverse forms of life as us, human beings, and these desert plants around me. Each of these species was genetically molded by its environment to reproduce and thrive. The scientific study of life is called biology. In their work, biologists ask such questions as, how does a single cell grow into an entire organism? How do the organisms of this environment interact with each other? And how does this desert plant protect itself against the heat? The answers to these biological questions can teach us things about the natural world and lead to a better understanding of life around us and of ourselves. Is there? So there's spiders. Too bad I can't get some B-roll of like a bug. To make sense of this vast field of knowledge, we can focus on a few big ideas or unifying themes to help us make sense of this biological information. They are organization, information, energy and matter, interactions, and evolution. The first theme we will look at is organization. Life can be studied at different levels of organization, from the tiniest atoms to the organization of the entire living planet. Let's look at these levels of organization, starting from the very large and moving to the very small. This kind of process is called reductionism. Reductionism seeks to see things with higher resolution and to reduce complex systems to simpler ones that are easier to study. I have to be honest with you, it's pretty cold floating around in outer space. However, from here you can get a great view of our home, the planet Earth. Looking down at our lonely planet, we see the first and most inclusive level of organization, the biosphere. The biosphere represents all life on Earth, as well as all the habitats from freezing cold and snow of the Arctic to the warm nights in a hot, steamy jungle. The biosphere is all of this. In fact, there are so many different forms of life that live here that scientists have yet to even name them all. The biosphere includes a variety of organisms that range in size from the tiny parasite Plasmodium falciparum that measures only 12 micrometers in length to the epic blue whale who can grow up to 98 feet long and weigh 190 tons. The biosphere is everything that is alive across the entire planet, as well as all of the components of the environments that they inhabit. As we zoom in on our next level of organization, we find ecosystems. Ecosystems include all the organisms living together in a particular area, as well as the environment with which they interact. The soil, the trees, the animals, and the weather all exist together in a dynamic interplay we call an ecosystem. Within these ecosystems, we find communities of different organisms living together and interacting. Things like plants, animals, and microorganisms. Where ecosystems include everything, the land, the weather, the climate, communities only refer to living organisms. If we look closely at these communities, we find a collection of unique populations of different species. Organisms that can only breed with other individuals of their same group are called a species. Where communities are made up of all the different species living in a single area, populations refer to all the organisms of a single species living in that particular area. Still further down the organizational hierarchy, we have individual organisms. Populations of living things that are essentially just groups of individual organisms that can interbreed. Each of these organisms form complex connections with its community and ecosystem. Individual animals, plants, and even bacteria are all organisms. Now, we will dive in past the outward barriers of each organism and begin to explore what lies inside. Within complex organisms like you and I are organs and organ systems. Your heart keeps blood pumping through your arteries. Your heart is an organ, and it combines with your blood vessels, a different organ, to make an organ system. The organs of this plant are its leaves, which gather sunlight to perform photosynthesis. Organs all serve a specific function and are made up of a variety of different tissue types. Tissues are made of groups of cells that act together to perform a specialized function. If we look closely at a plant leaf, we can see that it has an outer layer of cells called the epidermis. It's true, plants also have a skin, even though it functions a little differently than the skin that you and I have. Cells are considered life's fundamental unit. Some organisms, like that parasite we saw earlier, consist of just a single cell, while humans like you and I are made of trillions of cells, each specialized to be a part of the tissues and organ systems that make up your body. Cells from all over your body look different from each other, and different from cells in a plant or a parasite, because they all have unique roles to play. Just as your body has internal organs, each with their own specialized task, cells also have internal structures that serve a variety of purposes. These internal structures are called organelles. Organelles serve as the organs of a cell. If we look inside the cells of a plant leaf, we will find chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are organelles that convert sunlight into energy and building materials for the plant. As we get down below the level of organelles, we find that everything here is made of molecules. Within the chloroplasts, we find the molecule chlorophyll. Chlorophyll's molecular structure, its unique arrangement of atoms, allows for it to capture and transfer incoming light energy to the plant's metabolic machinery. Here, it is easy to see the chemical basis of life. We finished this reductionist journey with atoms. Atoms make up all the molecules in your body. It is the unique and varied arrangements of these atoms that are the fundamental machinery that makes a tree into a tree and you into you. We started this journey by looking at all these levels of organization, and slowly, with ever-increasing magnification, we subdivided our way as far down as we needed to go. However, it is important to stop and realize that if we take the same journey, only starting here at the atomic level and moving back out to the biosphere, we can notice that as each level moves to the next, the structure and function of that level provides the basis for the next level up. This increasing web of interactions create what biologists call emergent properties. Emergent properties, such as the ability of this leaf to capture light energy, are the combined result of molecules, making organelles, making cells, making tissues, and ultimately the formation of organs, such as this leaf. In other words, biologists must look not only at the tiny details found with reductionism, but they must combine that with systems biology, which is concerned with understanding the interactions of higher order structures and systems. An important takeaway is that there is a strong connection in biology between structure and function at all levels of organization. When we look at the structure of biological systems, it can give us a clue to its function. Now that we've covered the theme of organization, let's talk about our next theme, information. In 1866, Gregor Mendel was a monk living in what is now the Czech Republic. His work with the plants led him to discover that organisms seem to inherit traits from both their parents. For 80 years, people wondered what it was that carried these traits from parent to offspring. It had to be stable because children did sort of resemble their parents, but it also had to be able to blend and form new traits that were a combination of both parents. It wasn't until 1944 when the scientific team of Avery, MacLeod, and McCarty discovered that DNA was the carrier of genetic information. DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is a chemical code written using 4 chemical letters that are often abbreviated to A, C, T, and G. These chemical letters, or bases, are paired and stacked on top of each other, forming a helix shape. The specific order of these bases is what codes for things like proteins, which can direct cellular function. Proteins are encoded in long strands of DNA called genes. The central dogma of biology is that DNA makes RNA makes proteins. RNA is a cellular messenger that is transcribed from the DNA gene sequence and used to make proteins by the process of translation. Proteins then fold up into their final shape, which can either do work in the cell or provide structural components. We can learn about specific genes and their function using a reductionist approach. However, we can also study how all the genes of an organism are coded by using a systems biology approach called genomics. Genomics studies the entire complement of DNA in an organism, which is referred to as its genome. Additionally, the entire set of proteins from an organism or a cell is called the proteome and can be studied using proteomics, which is what I did my PhD doing. Our next theme is energy and matter. We have previously discussed that plants use light from the sun as energy. Additionally, plants draw chemicals from the soil. Plants grow by using the light energy captured from the sun, chemicals drawn from the soil, and carbon dioxide collected out of the air. The chemicals that were condensed into the plant can now be eaten by animals. When those animals die, their bodies return to the earth, where microorganisms and fungi can break their bodies down into the chemicals which plants can then use to grow. This cycle continues as long as the chemicals are available and energy from the sun can be captured. This leads us directly into our next theme, interactions. Life in the biosphere is made possible by the interactions of the environment and all the living organisms that inhabit them. Changes in the environment can radically change the interactions of the organisms that depend on it. Throughout the history of life on Earth, changes in the environment have had dramatic impacts. Millions of years ago, the atmosphere of the Earth was mainly carbon dioxide. Plants evolved to use this carbon dioxide as building materials and gave off oxygen as a waste product. This slowly increased the atmospheric oxygen content and allowed for the evolution of new organisms, like mammals. If we are not careful, we can swing this environmental change back again. The environment and the organisms that inhabit it are linked, and how they change are a result of their interactions. Good? Okay. Now that we've considered the other themes of biology, we have come to the most important. Evolution. Evolution is the theory of the history of our planet. It is an epic tale of billions of years of molecules, making cells, making organisms, and finally, making you and I. To learn about the birth of the theory of evolution, we only need to go back to the 1800s. It begins with Charles Robert Darwin, born in England in 1809. Darwin dropped out of medical school but studied natural theology at Cambridge in the late 1820s. In 1831, Darwin set sail on the HMS Beagle to the Galapagos Islands. These were a series of islands near Ecuador. Darwin noticed that finches on the different islands showed striking differences in the shapes of their beaks. He returned from this voyage, and in 1859 he wrote his book, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. In his book, Darwin reasons that individual organisms within populations vary in their traits. This is why I look similar to, but slightly different than, my brother. Connected to this, Darwin observed that birds in the Galapagos had a range of different beak sizes. Next, he points out that a population can produce far more offspring than can survive to reproductive age. Species generally reproduce in greater numbers than the environment can sustain. Some of these species are killed by predators before they can reproduce, and others starve to death if the food supply runs too low. Third, and finally, Darwin noticed that the birds on each island were adapted specifically for the food sources available on that island. He recorded that birds with harder beaks could eat nuts with a hard shell found on the ground. He also noticed that the finches who fed on cactuses had longer, more pointed beaks than the bulky beaks of the nut-eating finches. These adaptations made each species of finch more fit to survive on food available in their respective environments. Darwin's theory of evolution proposes two ideas: descent with modification and natural selection. Descent with modification is based on the idea that offspring don't have the exact same traits as their parents. They can be smaller, longer, lighter, darker, or have slightly different proportions. The key to evolution is that these variations can be favored by the environment for survival. This environmental favoritism is called natural selection. Dark-colored mice on a light sandy beach are more likely to be seen and therefore eaten by predators than their lighter-colored brothers and sisters. However, on the dark forest floor, the dark-colored mice are more likely to thrive and remain hidden. Thus, natural selection is the result of variations in a population interacting with the environment and selecting for advantageous traits. What biologists have discovered since Darwin is that all life is related. DNA, the genetic code in the heart of every living cell, can mutate and change with each successive generation, and that natural selection favors the changes most adapted to the environment. We know now that all the species on the planet, including us, have descended from a common ancestor that arose on Earth some 4 billion years ago.